Chapter 6. For the second morning in a row, the Friday edition of Strattonburg Gazette ran a front page story about the Red Creek bypass. Theo read it with great interest at the kitchen table as he and Judge ate Cheerios and prepared for another day, although it was far from just another day because he was going camping. The only bad thing about a camping trip was that dogs were not allowed. Theo and a few other scouts had once asked the major if they could bring their dogs, and they got a flat no. The major said his job was difficult enough keeping up with 50 city kids off in the woods. The last thing he needed was a pack of dogs running wild. Though he didn't argue, Theo was thought this was a bit unfair. Josh was a very disciplined dog who came when he was told to come, sat when he was told to sit, rolled over when he was told to roll over, and never ran off. He stayed close to Theo at all times when they were away from home. Judge would love to camp out with the boys and sit around a campfire and sleep with Theo in a pup tent and hike and swim. But when the major said no, he meant it. Mr. Boone was already gone. He enjoyed an early piece of wheat toast with his coffee club at the downtown diner. Miss Boone did not eat breakfast. Instead, she usually sat in the den in her bathrobe and read the newspaper in silence. For a woman who talked all day long, she enjoyed the quietness of the early morning. Occasionally, though, like today, she sat in the kitchen table with Theo, and they read the newspaper together. He was leaving for the weekend, and she wanted to be close. According to the Gazette, the announcement by the governor had set off a storm bickering by various groups in town. The tree huggers, led by the Sierra Club, the Stratton Environmental Council, and a bunch of other groups, were screaming noisy objections and threatening lawsuits. The pro business crowd was praising the governor, and the bypass was howling about how bad traffic was on Battle Street and how much this was hurting the city. A good government group chimed in the protest that the project was too wasteful and unnecessary. Several landowners were angry that the state planned to take their property. Hardy Quinn's family was not mentioned. In other parts of the state, the governor was being congratulated for pushing the project. In Lowensburg, an hour south, the mayor said the absence of bypass around Strattonburg had choked off important avenues of commerce and harmed the economy of his city. In Carlsberg, an hour to the north, a state senator said two factories had closed in recent years because truck traffic was so slow around Strattonburg. The war of words raged on. As he read, Theo learned that the final decision on whether or not to build the bypass would be made by the county commission, a board with 5 elected members from the 5 districts in the county. 2 commissioners were on record favoring the bypass, 2 were undecided. The fifth one could not be found at the moment. On page 2, there was a large map of Stratton County, with the city square in the middle of it. Highway 75 was a major 4-lane road that ran the entire length of the state and was heavily traveled. When it got to the northern part of Strattonburg, it became known as Battle Street, and that's where the problem started. Keep the old section of the town from being too congested, city and county planners had shoved virtually all development out of the city limits and into the county. For almost 30 years, shopping centers, fast food joints, car washes, motels, bank branches, big grocery stores, service stations, and the like had been crammed together along both sides of Battle Street, which had gone from 2 lanes to 4 to 6 and now to 8. There was a lot of traffic, but it moved reasonably well. The strategy had worked because the charm and characters of old sections of Strattonburg had been preserved. It was not unusual to hear people complain about the mess out on Battle Street, but in all fairness, that 5 mile section of Highway 75 kept the traffic off Main Street. The bypass would begin just north of the city limits and make a wide semicircle away from the congestion and into the rural areas. It would pass by it would pass very close to the Jackson Elementary School, and it would plow through a brand new soccer complex adjacent to the school. It would destroy St. Andrew's Lutheran, a small church that dated back over 200 years. It would require the taking by eminent domain of 50 homes and a dozen farms, including the Quinns. It would reduce the values of another 400 homes. It would wipe out the Red Creek Trail, a popular 15-mile hike and bike pathway through the hills around Strattonburg, and it would cross Red Creek in two places. According to those in favor of the bypass, it would relieve the congestion on Battle Street by taking between 20 and 25,000 vehicles a day off that street. What a mess, thought Theo as he finished his Cheerios. However, on this Friday, the arguments over the bypass belonged to someone else. Theo was going camping and little else mattered. What's the plan? His mother asked as he rinsed both bowls and placed them in the sink. School's out at 3:30, and I'll hustle home to get my stuff. Everything's packed: clothes, sleeping bag, toothbrush, etc. I'll meet you here at 4 and you take me to the VFW. Sounds like a plan. Go brush your teeth. He said this every morning. Theo ran upstairs to his bathroom, ran water in the sink, but did not brush his teeth, grabbed his backpack, and returned to the kitchen. Do you have lunch money? She asked. The same question 5 mornings a week. Always. And your homework is complete? It's perfect, Mom. Theo was halfway out the door. Be careful, Theo, and remember to smile. I'm smiling, Mom. Love you, Teddy. Love you back, he said, and closed the door behind him. Judge followed him to the edge of the garage, where Theo scratched the dog's head, said goodbye, hopped on his bike, and took off. Theo, was not actually smiling. He had the thickest braces in the 8th grade and was dying to get rid of them. Maybe next month, his orthodontist kept saying. He mumbled in the word Teddy and was thankful none of his friends ever heard it. It was a baby name only his mother kept using. Even Mr. Boone had moved on to Theo, or occasionally when he was lecturing Theodore. As Theo sped away on his bike, he almost shuddered thinking about the abuse he would take if his friends ever caught on to the Teddy business. 13-year-old boys were pretty brutal when it came to nicknames, and so far Theo had avoided getting tagged with a bad one. Fred Jasper was fair skinned with freckles and had been called Freck for so long the name is now permanent. Freck's best friend Brandon Taylor had dissected a bullfrog with a steak knife when he was only 10 years old and had since been known simply as Frog. Freck and Frog, you saw them together everywhere. Poor Scott Butts had an unfortunate last name that gave rise to an amazing variety of colorful and often tasteless nicknames and jokes. Indeed, almost every boy in 8th grade was known by something other than his real name. Theo had asked his mother to stop calling him Teddy, partly out of fear that else might hear it. She always just smiled as if was just their private little matter. She had brought him into this world and loved him like no other. And if Teddy was the first name she called him, then she would probably use it forever. But she would keep it between them. Theo certainly hoped so. Theo waved and smiled at Mr. Nunnery, a nice old man who was able to sit on his porch for hours without moving. The air was clear and cool, and the weather forecast for the weekend was perfect. No rain in sight. Last month, the troop camped near some Indian burial mound in a state park, and it rained for 3 straight days. Fun, still, but when the campsite was nothing but mud and the campfires are too soaked to burn, and the food is soggy and ruined, and no one has a dry stitch of clothing, well, it's time to go home. The bus had once been painted in the standard yellow and had hauled kids to and from school. It was now painted a dark green with white trim, with Boy Scout Troop 1440, Old Bluff Council, Strattonburg, in bold letters and numbers down both sides. On board were 38 scouts, all in perfect uniforms, all terribly excited to be leaving home and leaving town. Behind the wheel was Major Ludwig, the unquestioned leader of this gang. And when he called the roll and closed the door, a loud cheer echoed through the bus. It was almost 4:30 p.m. on Friday, and Lake Marlowe was just 2 hours away. The packed benches were stuffed with with a small mountain of camping gear, all neatly arranged under the major's supervision. Seated behind him were three adults, fathers of various scouts drafted as volunteers for the weekend. They would be known as the Old Goats Patrol. They sipped coffee from paper cups and laughed amongst themselves. It was obvious they were as excited as the boys. The bus weaved through the streets of Strattonburg, then headed west out of town. As the traffic thinned and miles clicked along, the excitement waned and several scouts nodded off. Others played video games. One or two read a book. Theo was gazing out a window, a cool breeze on his face, when Hardy Quinn swapped seats and fell in beside him. In a low voice, Hardy said, "We met at the farm last night, the whole family. Everyone's really upset by this, Theo." In a low voice, Theo replied, "Has anyone talked to a lawyer?" "Yes, my dad met with one yesterday for a long time, and the guy said the same thing. If the state wants to take our land, then it can do so. Of course, it has to pay us, but with eminent domain, the state can do whatever it wants." Theo shook his head. Hardy went on. "My poor grandparents are so upset by this. They've been married for 50 years and they've lived in only one place, the farm. If they have to leave, it'll just kill them. Both of them were crying last night. It was just awful. They don't care about the money and they don't want the state to write them a check. They want to keep their property. It's more than just land, Theo, you know." Theo was listening as if he knew precisely. Hardy said, "We gotta figure out a way to fight this thing, Theo." Theo wasn't sure how he had been drafted so quickly into a fight. "What do you mean?" "According to my dad, it's a simple matter of politics. There are 5 members on the county commission, and they have to approve the bypass. Those of us who are opposed to it have to get organized and convince the commissioners it's a bad idea. My dad and my uncles are trying to organize things as quickly as possible. They think it might be a good idea for our scout troop to get involved." "Why?" "Because this bypass could do some real damage to the environment. All of the city's drinking water comes from Red Creek, and no one knows how much the bypass will affect it. Plus, there'll all be all this truck traffic zooming by Jackson Elementary School. Think of the noise and exhaust fumes. It could be terrible. What if we talk to the major about making this project for the whole troop?" "I'm not sure the major will want to get involved in local politics." Hardy thought about this for a moment and said, "I think we should talk to him this weekend. Find a quiet moment and just run it by him. It can't hurt anything." "Let me think about it," Theo said. He was a little irritated Hardy would bring up such an unpleasant issue at a time of great excitement, but he gave him a break. Tried to imagine how he would feel if the government wanted to bulldoze the Boone home and the rest of the neighborhood to build a parkway. Of course, he would be upset. That's the end of chapter 6.